All right, let's start. I hope people will join as and when they can and they will. Hi, everyone. Welcome to my lightning talk. Is Drupal dead? All right, let's start. Let me start with a bit about myself. My name is Suchi Garg. You can find me online as Garg Suchi, pretty much everywhere. So that means I'm Garg Suchi on Twitter, on LinkedIn, etc. I'm Garg Suchi. Currently, I'm working with Salsa Digital as a technical manager. By the way, I'm in Melbourne. It is 4:40 a.m. So please don't mind if I start yawning at any point of view. All right, so I have been working with Drupal since 2009. I started working with Drupal, Drupal 4.6. Yes, I'm old. And yes, Dan, I do have coffee with me. Okay. I started as a developer, but during the long journey, I have done quite a lot of hats. I have been a developer, I have been a trainer, a QA, I've done some project management, as everybody needs to do. I have been a tech lead, tech architect, a tech lead, etc., etc. Because I've been working so long, I think these are the concerns that almost everyone has. But before I go into that, let's just start with the why of why are we having this discussion? Why are we even thinking about Drupal and is it dying? Why are we having these kinds of questions? Whether Drupal's user base has been growing or has been stagnant in size, this has been a very hotly debated subject. And this has been happening for years. This whole debate has been happening for years. I think this debate has been happening a lot more ever since Drupal came into picture. So I would say 2015, end of 2015 onwards. So before I with getting more discussions around that, let's try to see some stats, let's try to analyze them, and then let's go ahead. So let's look at one stat. This is a listing, or this stat actually shows how many, if you look at how we have 100 websites which are run by Drupal, then how many of them are essentially run by the different variations. And just note that this is a stat from W3 Techs, and these are as latest as 12th of April 2021. So as we can see, even now, even today, or let's say on 12th of April, the version 7, the Drupal D7, still powered 64.7% of all the Drupal websites in the world. And D8, just 28.5%. D9, which has just recently come in, is 1.6%, and I think we can ignore the other ones here. Now, what is concerning here is that Drupal 8 was released in November 2015, in more than 5 years. But if we look at the adoption rate of Drupal 8, it's not been that great. It has not been as adopted as Drupal 7 essentially was ever. Let's try to look at some more stats, maybe in a different realm. These are the usage trends of CMSs. This again is from W3 Tech, and this essentially lists all the websites in the world. So if we look at the stats for 2020, 1st of April 2020, we see that 43.4% of all the websites in the world were not CMS enabled, CMS was not powered by CMSs. And if we look at the same stats on 12th of April 2021, that has actually decreased from 36 to 36.7%. So there's a decrease from 43.4 to 36.7. So this essentially means that the adoption for CMSs as general is actually increasing. Now let's the same stats for Drupal, which by the way is pretty down the line. So 1st of April 2020, Drupal's stat were at 1.6%. Now it has decreased to 1.5%. So from the whole global pie, Drupal has actually decreased. In comparison, I mean, there is one CMS that almost everybody compares Drupal to. And yeah, we don't want to name that CMS, but let's name it. The CMS that should not be named. We're talking about WordPress here. So if you look at the same stats for WordPress, that has increased from 35.7% to a 41%. That is almost 4.5% of a jump. That is a huge jump. So when we look at these kinds of stats, it does raise a concern. And that is why we are having this lightning talk or discussion. So is Drupal actually dying? Should we as developers invest in Drupal? Should we as site owners or site developers invest in Drupal? Let me also show you another stat. Again, a pretty negative stat for Drupal. So Stack Overflow did a developer survey in 2020, and this is a listing of their top most dreaded web frameworks. And Drupal is second. So Drupal is the second most dreaded framework as per the developers. The topmost is AngularJS. I mean, looking at these stats, do you now understand what we are saying here? So what is happening with Drupal? Why are we even having these kinds of is Drupal going on a downfall? Is something like this happening? Now, let's look at some stats on the flip side, and let's try to counter the stats that we just saw and try to understand why and what is happening there. Yes, Jeremiah, I understand. For perspective, Sitecore and AEM only about 0.1%. This is again a stat, listing of stat from WT Text. And on the x-axis, we have the number of sites, and on the y-axis, we have the high traffic sites. And we can actually very clearly see that Drupal, even though it is used by much less sites by number, but when we look at the high traffic sites, it is much higher as when we compare it with any of the other ones, whether it's WordPress, Shopify, Joomla, etc. We can clearly see that Drupal is the preferred CMS for high traffic websites. Whatever and wherever it lacks in quantity, it surely makes up with quality there. There is another image. I really love this one. This is actually a graph which was shared by Dries in one of his state of Drupal presentations. On the x-axis, we have the expertise of the user, and on the y-axis, we have negative, positive. So when a user is a beginner, they find Drupal modern, premium, empowering, yes, but they do not find it clear, and they would never ever recommend, and that's a big ouch for us. So as the expertise of the users grow, they start getting more comfortable with Drupal as a product, and they start to know how empowering it can be, and then that's where the whole would recommend comes into the positive side. But even then, you can still see that clear and would recommend is still a very slow, very small part of the whole thing. The modern, premium, and empowering aspect of Drupal does increase considerably as users gain expertise, but the clear and would recommend is still, okay, we need to do something about it. So, and there is a reason behind it. There is a big, huge reason behind it. As I said, even the beginners call it empowering. So there is concern there about the product as such, as the usage of the product as such. It is great web framework, but they don't really think it's user-friendly. But the reason behind that is with site building software, power and simplicity, they cannot hand. And this is essentially why enterprises, governments, and I think somebody in the chat actually mentioned government specifically. That was Russell Eck. Yes, government. So enterprises, governments, and higher education, they do lean heavily in its favor. Drupal is known for its security. It's also better for building web applications. It is pretty much the go-to software for more complex integrations and project with multiple user roles. The stats are clear as users as Drupal features heavily among the biggest and the most visited websites, essentially. There is this another graph I found, and on the x-axis here is beginner, intermediate, again the user expertise, and on the left, on the y-axis, we have their perception, whether it's a negative and positive. And it is no surprise that in this graph, if you look at the beginner point, WordPress has the most positive feels from the beginners, but grows, that field starts to go down. WordPress has always been geared more towards non-technical site administrators, and its admin interface is more accessible, at least historically, than Drupal's. So it's easier for a newcomer to hit the ground running with WordPress. And Richard, I do say Drupal definitely is a favorite among US federal government. I do agree. But being in Australia, I can really say that Drupal is a favorite amongst the Australian federal government as well as the state governments as well. So that's a plus one. Coming back to my presentation, so there is, if you look at the four web frameworks shown here, there is only one framework that actually consistently, the user sentiment actually improves over time as the users gain expertise. And that is, as we can clearly see, the Drupal, the blue one. And why does that happen? That users become more experienced with any framework that they have been using. They start figuring out the strengths of whatever they're using. And while they figure out the strengths, they also start figuring out the shortcomings of the framework, which results in the other cases, the one not to be named, to the increasingly negative user sentiment scores. And that's what's happening with Sitecore. As you can see, it's pretty much the opposite of how Drupal is going. So what are we essentially saying? We did see some stats which showed Drupal in a really, really negative light, but we do have some stats which try to counter them. Let me try to break these things down a bit. So what we are saying, and I'm repeating myself, with site building software, power and simplicity doesn't always go in hand. That is why enterprises, governments, as we just mentioned, higher education, etc., they always lean in the favor of the Drupal. So Drupal actually features heavily among the biggest and most visited sites. Many of the organizations using Drupal are Fortune 500 companies, and they are using Drupal to accelerate utilization of the modern web. Let's the modern web. Some of the reasons why Drupal has been a favored content management system for large organizations are emphasis on security. They're better for applications, the complex integration, user roles, etc., etc. But how is Drupal actually able to do that? What are the things that are supporting Drupal to get that done? Well, the devil is in the detail. In his keynote in Amsterdam 2019, Dries had proposed 4 big, huge pillars for Drupal core growth. As we had seen in the last couple of slides, the biggest problem or the biggest issue with the Drupal has always been the acceptance, the adoption of the early people, and the beginner experience was something that really that was something that really needed, and Drupal is now trying to focus on that. Some of the initiatives, some of the things that have been done in this field, in this initiative, have been things like the Umami, launching of the new front-end theme, Olivero, which actually increases the beginner experience. Umami really helped as a distribution, because that's when if somebody is trying Drupal and they go ahead and create install Umami, they actually have a site as compared to like the blue ugly website that we used to have earlier. Claro, the new admin. I mean, 7 was perfectly okay, but it was designed in 2007, and it was, yes, old. The other initiative, Drupal should drive the open web. 7 to 10 years ago, Drupal was seen as a direct competitor to content management systems, but that's not the case now, because the definition of content management systems has indeed changed. It used to be a monolithic thing for just creating content and also managing the display. Now things have really changed. That's not how it is done now. Reducing the cost and effort. If you look at we do say that yes, Drupal is open source, it's free. Yes, it's free to install, but there are costs associated. Major costs are development cost and the maintenance cost. The development cost have been Drupal, the Drupal Association or Drupal as a whole has tried to look at them, look at low configuration management, and then managing the maintenance been something that has been initiatives like automated updates have been really good in that direction. And of course, being the best structured data engine, we all know the capabilities that Drupal has when it comes to data modeling. As I was saying, that the capabilities of the more modern, robust CMSs are very, very different. And Drupal's and these are some of the requirements: structured data, robust APIs, editorial and workflow tools, dependency and configuration management, performance and scalability, and richness and reach. So these are the few things that, and sorry, I'm really rushing through my slide now because I think I am pretty much out of time. But these are the things where Drupal has been really trying. In fact, just a couple of hours ago, Dries actually introduced a new initiative that was the project browser, so that the site, it eases the life of the site builders rather than just the developers. So these are the initiatives that have really helped grow, and these are the initiatives that have really made sure that Drupal is growing in the right direction. Very quickly coming to the conclusion, again, rushing through it. I'll make sure that these slides are available for you to have a look at it later. Content management today is not what it was 10 years ago. It's not a monolithic framework now that can act as both editorial content store as the display layer. And I mean, that's not what's happening today. I don't even know how many times you've heard the word decoupled. It has sort of become the buzzword. Anyways, so that was the understanding about 7-10 years ago how CMS should be. And that is exactly what a lot of established CMS projects did. But over the last few years, this whole thing about just a content store and a display layer has been actually commoditized by very inexpensive proprietary services like Wix, Squarespace, etc. So what I'm essentially saying here is that purpose of a robust CMS like Drupal is no longer just building blogs, portfolio sites, or brochureware. And yes, I'm sorry, I'm keeping a track on decouple. Is the new black or is it the new orange? We really don't know. So the purpose of Drupal is not blogs, portfolio sites, brochureware, even though Drupal can still do it. Drupal doesn't actively look to compete at the simple site building tools. We don't even consider WordPress as a competitor. Drupal has actually mastered the art of content management. I would actually go for so far as that. And now the advancement made in the present version are prepared to start taking on new, bigger things. In my opinion, Drupal should be known less as a CMS and more as an infrastructure development and delivery tool for websites and other web applications. And it's a beast of CMS, and it's not going anywhere soon. Thanks, guys. That's all for my my quick lightning talk. Let's see if I have any Q&As. I don't have any Q&As, or maybe I can see. I don't know. Yes, Tanisha, I'll be uploading my presentation to Dropbox pretty soon. Are there any questions? I tried to keep track of the chat, but I don't see any questions, I think. None in the Q&A. Please do try to take the polls. Let me see if I can show the polls. All right, thanks a lot, everybody. Please make sure that you rate my session. Thank you. Bye.